Welcome to Mind Exploit Online Tutor. I want to hope that you are subscribed to our YouTube channel, Mind Exploit Educational Consult, and that you are following us already on all our social media handle, Mind Exploit Educational Consult. Like I promised in our last video, we're going to do a review of the Lekki Headmaster, which is a prose that has 12 different chapters. The story is centered around the character Mr. Bepo Adewale, who is a light-skinned tall man, as is being described, and he is a principal of the Stardom school. It's a very interesting book to read, I tell you. After this review, in our next video, we are going to generate 40 possible questions based on the information in chapter 1, which is titled Dusk. So you're going to have about 40 multiple choice questions set from the chapter 1 to help us with all possible likely questions JAMB is going to test us with in the forthcoming JAMB examination on the use of English based on the literature test Lekki Headmaster, basically based on the content in chapter 1. The title of chapter 1 is Dusk. So basically, when you want to get the best from a literature test, my advice is that you pay attention to 3 important things. Number 1, the characters, the names of the persons, and the role that they play in the sequence of events. Number 2 is that you must pay attention to the places where those events takes place. Number 3 is that you must pay attention to what those characters say. So once you pay attention to these 3 things, you are likely not to get it wrong if and when you are asked any question on that particular text or literature. Basically, there's a school in Lekki, in the port area of Lekki. Lekki is in Lagos State, and Lagos is the city of excellence, okay, the former capital of Nigeria. So this school is called the Stardom School, and this school is one of the Ivy school in Lagos, located in Lekki. And basically, the school had a principal called Mr. Bepo Adewale. This man was, according to the director of the school, which we're going to talk about later, the school builder, because he has been in the management of that school for nearly 24 years. So, Mr. Bepo Adewale first was the headmaster of Stardom Kiddies, which is the primary section of Stardom School, before he was promoted to becoming the principal of the secondary section of the school. And he has been an inspiration to not just the teachers, but equally to the pupils. He is being loved by the parents because of his management skills. He's a tall, light-skinned man, a disciplinarian, a person that paid attention to details. You will see why reading through that chapter 1, where he pays attention to correcting his students in particular on how to properly pronounce words. At some point, he was called the principal because at every point in time when anybody calls him the principal, he would always correct them and tell you that no, the ending syllable should not be pronounced as ha, pa, but should be pronounced as principal. Alright, so he was such a detailed person who paid attention to details and was always interested in getting the best out of his students. So before the particular day that the event in chapter 1 happened, there was a celebration of the success the school had in the last WAEC. So the last WAEC they wrote, over 90% of the students had a minimum credit in all their 9 subjects offered in WAEC. So they had a celebration the day before this event. And what the management of the school did is to give all staffs snacks and a bottle of wine. Then teachers who were teaching SS3 were given 20,000 naira each. But those teachers whose students had distinctions in their subject were rather paid 30,000 naira. So virtually almost all the teachers went home with a minimum of 20,000 naira, except for 2 persons whose students had a D. And basically, those 2 persons affected were the chemistry teacher in person of Mr. Obong and the geography teacher in person of Ms. Taye Karim. So begin to pay attention to those names and those events that are tied to those names. The questions will be asked around the names and the roles or the events tied around those characters. So Mr. Obong, the chemistry teacher, and Ms. Taye Karim, the geography teacher, were questioned. They were queried as to why students will have D in their subjects. So it shows us that the school is a school that is known for high standard and that has a very high level of discipline. In fact, as a matter of fact, the school doesn't condone failure. Any subject teacher that teaches SS3 and a student writes WAEC and fails will be sacked immediately. So that was the experience that Mr. Daniel Funsho, who even was a cousin to the managing director of the school, that was the experience he had a year before when one of the students failed his subject in WAEC and he was shown the way out of the school, and he was not even spared because of his relationship with the school director. That was what happened the day before this specific incident started. The day after, it was the assembly, and the assembly was already structured in such a way that it has an opening prayer. After the opening prayer, there will be a pep talk, and after the pep talk, there would be the presentation by the principal or the vice principal before the students are discharged to their various classes. This pep talk was more or less like a talk where students encourage each other. They give students topics. It could be inspirational or motivational talk. They would come do the presentation. That would help the students in their development of public speaking skills and also helping them with confidence in facing the crowd. At least the students can easily also learn from each other. So 7 years before this period, the principal, Mr. Bepo Adewale, introduced this pep talk to the school, and all students fell in love with this particular section of the morning assembly. Basically, the way they structured, like we said, they start with prayers. So on Mondays, Wednesday, and Fridays, we have 5 days in the week. On Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, there would be either a Muslim or Christian prayer, after which the student will say the first stanza of the national anthem. Then they will go into the pep talk, and after the pep talk, the principal will come for his presentation and will discharge the students. Then on Tuesday and Thursday, there's actually no religious prayer. Rather, they will say the second stanza of the national anthem, "O God of creation, direct our noble cause." Are we together? So that has been the ritual of the assembly Monday to Friday. Basically, what students were used to, the principal, Mr. Bepo Adewale, is always standing at the back of the students. So after the pep talk, the anchor of the assembly will collect the mic from whoever is presenting the pep talk, and eventually the principal will come up from the back with his signature smile, takes up the mic, jeers up the students, and say whatever he has to say and discharge the students. This particular day, the pep talk was given by Ikena Egu. Ikena Egu is a student in science class, SS1, and he had just returned from an excursion the school went for in Jos. Talking about this excursion, it was a 2-day excursion, and prior to the time they went for that excursion, they had increased the excursion fee. There's a specific amount students pay every term for excursion to wherever they are going. So this time they were supposed to go for an excursion in Jos, and the fee was just increased by about 93,000 naira. So there was a character who was mentioned in the process of describing this increment, and that is the fine art teacher who is known for being a rumor monger, who is known for a side talk. Left to Mr. Howdo, the increment was high and he was expecting that the parents should agitate or complain. But the school was able to successfully hike that excursion fee and no parent complained. Now, one of the reasons why no parent complained was that it was still around that time, in the beginning of that section, the school decided to reduce the hostel accommodation fee from 250,000 naira per term to 165,000 naira per term. So that was a significant reduction. Why did the school make this reduction? They noticed that students are fond of coming late to the assembly ground. Of course, Lagos is a busy place. There are traffic on the way to school because people bring their children from different parts of Lagos, be it the island or the mainland. So sometimes they cannot control the traffic. The assembly will almost be over before some students were coming into the school. So what the school management did was, let us reduce the hostel accommodation fee. So they reduced it from 250,000 naira to 165,000 naira to help encourage parents to put more of their students into boarding school. And they saw a very phenomenal response to that reduction, because from whatever percentage it is, the number of students that were now staying in the hostel increased to 80%. So about 80% of the students are now staying in the school premises as boarding students. That was able to achieve his aim. So by 7:45, now most students are already on the assembly ground, waiting for the assembly section to start. So because they have reduced this boarding fee, parents were happy. Therefore, while they made an increment in the excursion fee, no parents necessarily complained. So Mr. Howdo, don't forget, who was a fine art teacher, is known of maybe side talk, unofficial talk while the assembly is going on. So that is that about the price adjustment on the excursion fee. So when they went to Jos, Ekena, in his pep talk, decided to talk about his experience while visiting Jos. And one of the resounding words that he said was that he saw Nigeria in its acrobatic beauty. Of course, Jos used to be a very beautiful place. As a matter of fact, because of their very good weather, most of the colonial masters, the missionaries who came to Nigeria at that time, would always love to spend time in Jos because the weather is as close to the weather you would have in the United Kingdom or America. So they went for this excursion during a dry season. This was a time that sun is always beating or scorching people. And the first surprise that Ekena had was that despite the fact that it was during the dry season that they went to Jos, the weather was cool and it was lovely. It was beautiful. They never felt the dryness. They never felt the disturbing scourge of the sun on their body. So that was one of the beautiful things. And when they got there, he realized that a number of white colonial masters lived in Jos because of the cool weather. As a matter of fact, I don't know if it still happens, but there are parts in Jos where you could grow apple because of the beautiful weather. So that was a statement made by Ekena that the visit to Plateau gave him an opportunity of seeing the acrobatic beauty of Nigeria. Of course, there are many beautiful places in Nigeria. He talked about the good things he observed while in Jos, and he mentioned 5 major places they visited while they were in Jos. Of course, Jos is the capital of Plateau State in northern part of Nigeria. The first place he mentioned that they visited was the Lamingo Dam. Then they went to the University of Jos. They went to Shere Hills. They went to Wase Rock. And finally, they went to Solomon La Amusement Park. So these were beautiful places that they visited. One final statement that Ekena made as he left the podium and he handed over mic to the chapel prefect who was on duty that morning. The chapel prefect is by name Angel, was a person in charge of the assembly that morning. So As Ekenal was wrapping up his thoughts and handing over mic to Angel, he made this statement, which possibly could have been part of what triggered the emotion that we later saw while the principal came and he took the mic from Angel to speak and address the student. And what was it that he said? He said, if I have the opportunity in future, I would like to settle down in Jos instead of japping to Canada or London. Of course, if you are a Nigerian, in the last 2, 3, 4 years, the word japa has become part of our dictionary because we have had a lot of Nigerians traveling out for greener pasture in Canada, the US, the United Kingdom. So in Ikena's opinion, he would have preferred in the future to live in Jos rather than traveling out of Nigeria to study. Of course, one good thing that was said about Ekena was that Ekena was an award-winning poet. Even though he was a science student, he was very good in the use of words and in presentation of his thoughts. So as soon as Ekena handed over mic to Angel, Agent said a few words and the principal came up in his gray suit to take over the mic from Angel. So one of the things that was noticed was that he was not having his normal smiling signature and he was not sounding like he was happy. Basically, before now, after a student says a pep talk, he would applaud the student, he would criticize the things he or she have said. It would actually bring out some few areas where such a student had made certain mistakes, maybe grammatical errors or what have you. So, but this morning, he just noticed that he was not happy. He took the mic, he was about to talk, and he was facing the ground, looking at the task of the assembly ground. Before now, he was used to looking into student faces, while he speaks to them in confidence. But today, his confidence was low, he was looking down, and as he was making effort to speak, tears was rolling from a side of his face. He was described to have sunken cheeks. So tears was rolling down. And in the breed of preventing the tears from coming, he faced down, he held the mic, and he stopped talking. As he tried to pick himself up to speak again, tears started coming down and people started to notice that it's like the principal was crying and everybody was wondering what is it that is wrong with Mr. Principal. In the effort of him trying to use his hands with the mic to cover his face so that students would not see him crying, the mic fell to the ground. And of course, he never bothered picking the mic. He just used the hand to guard his face to prevent students from seeing him cry. So it was at that point that the vice principal, who is called Mrs. Grace Ape, came up and asked the principal what the problem was. Before we knew what was happening, the principal was joined by the nurse of the school, Miss Titi, to inquire from the principal what the problem was. In fact, Miss Titi, as a caring nurse, gave the principal, Mr. Bepo, an handkerchief to wipe his tears away. So when they saw that the principal was not saying anything, he was just crying, they decided to move the principal to his office. And while doing that, Mrs. Grace Ape, the vice principal, instructed the chemistry teacher by name Mr. Justus Hannibal to round up the assembly while she, Nurse Titi, and the CRS teacher, Mr. Oyelano, guided the principal back to his office. Are you getting it? So you must begin to pay attention to those details of the characters and what the characters said. So as soon as Mr. Justus Hannibal discharged the students, news started flying around to parents here and there that the principal of the school was wailing, was crying, blah, blah, blah. So the news started flying around. Of course, the rest of the staff, being that they love their principal, shortly after the assembly, virtually all the rest of the teachers came to the principal's office to know what exactly the problem was and why the principal was acting that way that morning. So when they came, After a few minutes, at about 8:05, the vice principal, Mrs. Grace Happe, discharged the rest of the teachers, asked them to go back to their classes, except for the guidance counselor, Mrs. Lekki Headmaster, the CRK teacher, and the school nurse. They were the ones that were left to be with the principal. So shortly after then, calls started coming in on the vice principal's mobile number. Like I said, the news was already getting out of the school that there's a problem. The principal is this, the principal is that. So parents were beginning to wonder what was the problem, what is wrong with their beloved principal. Basically, they were calling the VP, Mrs. Grace Happe, to know the situation of things with the principal. She couldn't pick their calls, of course, and she quickly realized that before things get out of hand, she needs to do something. And what is it that she needed to do? She needed to call the school MD. Of course, the school MD supposed to be in school that morning, except for the fact that she had to attend to something important in town that morning. So that was why she was out of school. So she called the MD, who is Mrs. Ibidun Gloss. They popularly call her MD. She called to let her know that there's a situation in school, particularly with the principal, which is a little bit out of their control. The principal was not saying anything. He was just sad, it was weeping, and perhaps the attention of the MD would be required in the school. So the MD left what she was doing and was rushing down to school. At about 9:30, she got to the school premises. Of course, it would have been a tension. Now, before I narrate the experience with the MD, one thing that I've left out, which I've not said, is the fact that they called Mr. Bepo Adewale the Lekki Headmaster because he is fond of imitating character of the principal in this old TV drama series called The Village Headmaster. So that was where they brought that name from. He used to act like that principal because that day where he was crying, he was on his grey suit. So he's fond of dressing well, imitating the character of the principal in The Village Headmaster. So that was why they called him the Lekki Headmaster, knowing fully well that the school is situated in Lekki, Lagos State, Nigeria. So the MD came, and as soon as she came, she went to the office. The office is on the second floor of the admin building. So the school is a standard school. They have an admin building, and the office of the MD, Mrs. Ibidun Gloss, is located on the second floor. So these are things that you should pay attention to. And as soon as she got to school around 9:30. She called for Mr. Bepo Adewale. She invited him to the office and she asked him what the problem was. She reminded him that he is basically a school builder and should not be found in that state where students would be seeing him cry. After talking to Mr. Bepo Adewale, trying to encourage him, blah blah blah, she asked him what the problem was. And for nearly like 30 minutes, Mr. Bepo Adewale, the principal, was not able to say anything. So the MD didn't know what else to do. Then she called for the physics teacher in person of Mr. Opewande. The reason why he called him is that Mr. Opewande, the physics teacher, was also a pastor. So he felt that he will be able to talk to the principal and the principal will be able to tell him what the problem was. And when Mr. Opewande came, he stood beside the principal and talked to him. He was speaking in words that the managing director of the school could not even hear, assuring Mr. Bepo Adewale that whatever it is that he tells him in confidence is not going to reveal to anyone. He's just trying to make him talk. But every effort made by Mr. Bepo to talk, he would burst into tears. And after doing that for like 10 or 15 minutes, Mr. Opewande, the physics teacher, told the managing director that at this point it would be good for them to get the phone number of the wife of the principal so that they can speak to the wife and maybe the wife intervention can help improve on the mood of the principal. So the managing director asked Mr. Adewale for the mobile number of his wife. So he put his hand in his breast pocket and wrote the number and gave the card to the managing director. It was then that the managing director realized that the two numbers written on that card were foreign numbers. Obviously, Mr. Bepo Adewale was now living alone. His wife and perhaps the family had traveled to the United Kingdom, to London, and obviously the wife was not around. So when they discovered that, they perhaps began to have an idea of why the principal would be in that state of mind. And to get the matter was, the two numbers given to the managing director were not going through. After the managing director had tried a number of times and could not reach through, she was equally agitated, and she told Mr. Opewande that, okay, let him just guide the principal to his office so that the principal can leave for his residence, should go home and relax, knowing fully well that the news has gotten outside of the school premises. It won't be nice for Mr. Bepo Adewale to still be in the school premises. It's better he goes home and relax, as the case might be. So it was in the middle of that the physics teacher, Pastor Wande, suggested that Mr. Bepo Adewale should not be let to go home alone, that might make the situation to grow worse, that it is better to let somebody go with him as a form of companionship. So the principal approved that perhaps the guidance and counselor can go with him, so that it will not be that he went or he sent home alone. So basically, they left the principal's office, escorted Mr. Bepo, the Lekki Headmaster, to clear his desk, and he was accompanied home. So that's the end of the first chapter, Dusk, and I hope you enjoyed the small review or narration of this chapter. In our next video, like I said, we are going to be examining 40 multiple choice questions that are likely to be questions you'll be asked based on the first chapter of the Lekki Headmaster. Before then, tell your friends, if you are preparing for 2025 UTME JAMB, that here is the best place to get the best of the review of the JAMB literature, and also to get the best of tutorials online to help you prepare well. All you need is your mobile phone with data. It's a free online class and you will get the best. So please follow all our social media handles, Mind Exploit Educational Consult, and make sure you subscribe on our YouTube channel, Mind Exploit Educational Consult. Till I meet you again in the next class, be the best of yourself and enjoy your day. Thank you.